My name is Madeline, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought a single Thanksgiving dinner would destroy my family, but that's exactly what happened last year. As my father proudly announced that my sister Heather had just purchased a beautiful 5-bedroom house in Oakwood Hills, I felt something inside me snap. That's interesting, considering I lent her the entire down payment that she swore she'd pay back 6 months ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Little did I know that one sentence would unravel decades of family secrets and favoritism. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're from. The family drama I'm about to share changed my entire life, and I wonder if things would have played out differently where you live. Drop a comment letting me know your location, and if you've ever had to confront a family member who betrayed your trust. This Thanksgiving nightmare turned into a year-long battle for justice that I'm still processing. If my story resonates with you, please subscribe to hear more about navigating toxic family dynamics and standing up for yourself. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this all ends. Growing up with Heather was like living in the shadow of a supernova. At 35, she was only 3 years older than me, but the gap in how our parents treated us felt like light years. From the moment she was born, Heather became the center of my parents' universe. She was their miracle baby after years of trying, while I was the unexpected surprise that came later. Our childhood photo albums tell the story better than I could. There are 5 thick volumes documenting every milestone in Heather's life: her first steps, first words, dance recitals, soccer games, and school plays. My album is significantly thinner, with most photos being obligatory school portraits or Christmas pictures where I'm awkwardly positioned at the edge of the frame. "We're just so tired from Heather's tournament" became my parents' standard excuse for missing my academic competitions or piano recitals. I eventually stopped telling them about my events, saving us all from the disappointment of empty seats in the audience. Meanwhile, Frank and Diana, my parents, never missed a single one of Heather's performances. Dad would take off work early and drive 3 hours if necessary to see her compete in regional cheerleading championships. Our different paths continued into young adulthood. I worked tirelessly through high school, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while juggling part-time jobs at the local library and waitressing on weekends. The partial scholarship I earned to State University still required me to work throughout college to cover the remainder of my tuition and living expenses. I graduated with minimal debt, a feat I remain proud of to this day. Heather's college experience looked vastly different. She attended an expensive private university where she changed her major 5 times before dropping out after 3 years. Then came the second college, another private institution with even higher tuition, where she lasted just 2 semesters. The third college attempt ended similarly, with my parents footing the bill each time without question. "College isn't for everyone, honey," my mother would say, comforting Heather after each academic failure. "You're just too creative for those structured environments." These same parents had lectured me about the importance of academic discipline and financial responsibility when I once considered taking a semester off to accept an internship opportunity. Despite the uneven playing field, I managed to build a successful career as a financial analyst. After 6 years of hard work at Meridian Partners, I had recently been promoted to senior analyst with a comfortable 6-figure salary. I lived within my means in a modest 2-bedroom condo that I purchased 3 years ago after saving diligently for the down payment. Heather, meanwhile, had a resume filled with half-finished projects and business ventures that inevitably failed. There was the boutique clothing store that closed after 8 months, the event planning company that never secured more than 2 clients, and the wellness coaching certification that cost thousands, but never resulted in actual clients. Each endeavor was enthusiastically funded by my parents, who would raid their retirement savings to give Heather just one more chance to find her passion. "Your sister is a free spirit," Dad would explain when I expressed concern about their financial sacrifices. "Not everyone can be as naturally disciplined as you, Madeline." Despite this history, I never stopped trying to be a supportive sister. When Heather's marriage to Ryan 3 years ago seemed to finally stabilize her life, I was genuinely happy for her. Ryan worked in pharmaceutical sales and appeared to be a positive influence. For the first time, Heather was talking about building a secure future instead of chasing the next exciting opportunity. 6 months before that fateful Thanksgiving, Heather called me in tears. She and Ryan had found their forever home, a house they'd fallen in love with but couldn't quite afford. The sellers were accepting another offer unless they could secure financing immediately. "We're so close, Maddie," she sobbed. "We just need help with the down payment. The bank says we qualify for the mortgage, but we don't have enough saved for the 20% down. If we don't put down at least 15%, the interest rate will be so much higher." Despite my boyfriend James's skepticism, I agreed to meet with Heather and Ryan the next day. James and I had been together for 2 years, and he had witnessed enough of the family dynamic to be wary. "Just make sure you get everything in writing," he cautioned. "Family loans have destroyed more relationships than I can count." Taking his advice, I insisted on a formal loan agreement. We met at my attorney friend Patricia's office, where we drafted and signed a contract for $75,000, the amount Heather claimed they needed to reach the 15% down payment threshold. The terms were clear. Repayment would begin in 3 months, with the full amount to be repaid within 6 months. Heather assured me they would be receiving year-end bonuses that would cover most of the repayment. "You're literally saving our future," Heather said, hugging me tightly. "I promise I'll pay back every penny." For the first month after the loan, Heather called regularly with updates on the house purchase and renovation plans. By the second month, the calls became less frequent. By month 4, she was consistently too busy to meet for our usual monthly sister lunch. When I texted to remind her about the upcoming first payment, her responses were vague. "Working on it," or "just waiting for some funds to clear." As the 6-month mark approached with no sign of repayment, my calls started going straight to voicemail. My texts about the money went unanswered, though Heather would still respond to casual messages about other topics. Meanwhile, her social media was filled with photos of new furniture, landscaping projects, and a spontaneous weekend getaway to a beachfront resort. The Thanksgiving invitation came from my mother, who mentioned how excited they were to see Heather and Ryan's photos of the new house. "They've done such amazing work with the place," Mom gushed. "Your sister really has an eye for design." I accepted the invitation with mixed emotions. On one hand, this would be the first time seeing Heather in person since the loan, giving me an opportunity to directly address the overdue repayment. On the other hand, I dreaded the potential confrontation at a family holiday. The night before Thanksgiving, James held me as I vented my frustrations. "I just don't understand how she can ignore such a significant financial obligation," I said. "It's not like I'm asking for a favor. It's her debt to repay." "Maybe she's planning to tell you tomorrow," James suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. "Either way, you need to address it directly. Don't let them gaslight you about this." Little did I know how prophetic his words would prove to be, or how completely one holiday dinner would transform my understanding of my family. Thanksgiving Day arrived with picture-perfect holiday weather, crisp autumn air, golden sunlight, and trees displaying their final colorful leaves before winter. James and I pulled up to my parents' brick colonial in Riverside, the same house where I'd grown up, at precisely 3 p.m. Heather's gleaming new SUV was already parked in the driveway, along with my parents' vehicles. "Ready for this?" James squeezed my hand reassuringly. "As I'll ever be," I replied, grabbing the homemade cranberry sauce and pumpkin pie from the back seat. The familiar scent of roasting turkey and my mother's signature sage stuffing greeted us as we entered. The house looked immaculate as always, with Diana's meticulous seasonal decorations adorning every surface. Miniature pumpkins, gourds, and fall-colored candles created the perfect Thanksgiving ambience that would make any home decor magazine proud. "There you are," Mom exclaimed, rushing over to take the dishes from my hands. She air-kissed my cheek before turning her full attention to James. "James, you look so handsome. That blue really brings out your eyes." Dad appeared from the kitchen, bourbon in hand. "The gang's all here now."
Come in.
Heather's been showing us the most amazing photos of the house. The living room tableau was exactly as I'd expected. Heather occupied the center of the sofa, holding court with her iPad displaying a slideshow of her new home. Ryan sat beside her, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. They looked like an advertisement for perfect domestic bliss. Maddie. James. Heather's voice carried the practiced enthusiasm of someone who'd been taking acting classes. She made no move to get up, instead waving us over. You have to see our breakfast nook. The lighting is absolutely magical in the morning. I forced a smile and settled into the armchair across from them. James stood behind me, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. The house looks beautiful, I managed, watching as she flipped through images of gleaming hardwood floors, vaulted ceilings, and a kitchen that belonged in a culinary magazine. We just put in a fire pit in the backyard, Ryan added. Perfect for summer entertaining. For the next 30 minutes, we engaged in the carefully choreographed dance of family pleasantries. We discussed safe topics like the unseasonably warm weather, Dad's golf game, and Mom's book club selections. Not once did Heather mention the loan or make any allusion to the financial help that had made her dream home possible. When Mom announced dinner was ready, we migrated to the dining room. The table was set with her best china and crystal glasses, reserved for special occasions and, apparently, celebrations of Heather's achievements. Once seated, Dad raised his glass for a toast. Before we dig into this beautiful meal, I want to say how grateful I am to have my family around this table. Diana, as always, you've outdone yourself with the cooking. He smiled at my mother before turning his gaze to Heather and Ryan. And I'm especially proud of you two for taking this big step. That house is absolutely gorgeous. 5 bedrooms in Oakwood Hills. That's the kind of neighborhood people work their whole lives to get into. He turned briefly toward me. And Madeline and James, congrats on the promotion, honey. You've always been our practical one. As glasses clinked, something inside me finally broke. 6 months of unanswered calls, ignored payment reminders, and watching Heather showcase a lifestyle that my money had helped purchase. It was too much. That's interesting, I said, my voice cutting through the celebratory atmosphere, considering I lent her the entire down payment that she swore she'd pay back 6 months ago. The silence that followed was absolute. Forks froze midway to mouths. Mom's smile remained fixed on her face, though her eyes widened in alarm. Dad's expression shifted from confusion to displeasure in the span of seconds. Ryan suddenly became very interested in rearranging his napkin. Heather was the first to recover. Maddie, why would you bring that up now? Her voice carried a hint of indignation, as if I had violated some unspoken rule by mentioning money at the dinner table. When should I bring it up? You don't answer my calls about it. You ignore my texts about repayment. Meanwhile, you're posting about your new patio furniture and weekend getaways. The months of frustration poured out of me. Dad cleared his throat. Madeline, this is hardly the time or place. She was going to tell you. Mom interjected, though she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Tell me what? I asked, looking directly at Heather. Tears began welling in Heather's eyes, her standard defense mechanism whenever confronted. I was going to talk to you about it after dinner, she said. Things have been so tight with the closing costs and moving expenses. What your sister means, Ryan intervened smoothly, is that we've had some unexpected expenses with the new house. We fully intend to repay you, of course, but we might need a little more time. That's not what we agreed to, I said firmly. The contract we signed. Contract. My mother's voice rose an octave. You made your sister sign a contract? Of course I did. It was $75,000, Mom. $75,000. My father nearly choked on his wine. I thought it was maybe 10 or 20. Heather's tears were flowing freely now. You know I'm good for it, Maddie. You said you wanted to help us. I did help you, by lending you money that you promised to repay. But you gave it to me, Heather said through sobs. You know how much that house meant to us. Gave? I felt like I had entered some parallel universe. We signed a legal document, Heather. I have a copy in my purse right now. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Ryan interjected. Heather mentioned it was more of a gift with flexible repayment whenever we were able. I stared at them in disbelief. That's absolutely not what happened. Madeline, my mother said in her most disappointed tone, your sister and Ryan are just starting out. They needed help with their first home. Surely you can understand that. Starting out? She's 35, Mom. And this is apparently their forever home in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the county. Why are you being so rigid about this? Dad demanded. You're doing well financially. You've always been good with money. That's because I work hard and make responsible choices, I shot back. And being good with money doesn't mean I can just give away $75,000. No one's saying give it away, Mom placated. Just be flexible with the timeline. The timeline was Heather's idea, I countered. 6 months. That's what she said she needed. A heavy silence fell over the table. I reached for my purse and pulled out the folded loan agreement, placing it on the table. I believe I deserve an honest answer, I said quietly. Were you ever planning to repay this money? Heather exchanged a glance with Ryan, then looked down at her plate. We were hoping that maybe once you saw the house and how happy we are, you might consider it a gift. Between sisters. The truth hit me like a physical blow. You never intended to pay me back. It's not that simple, Ryan began. It is exactly that simple. I cut him off. You lied to me to get my money. Madeline. Dad's voice had that authoritative tone he used when ending discussions. Your sister has always been there for you, emotionally. Not everything comes down to dollars and cents. When has she ever been there for me? I challenged. Name one time she's made a sacrifice for me. That's unfair, Mom interjected. You've always been so independent. You never needed the kind of support Heather does. So, because I'm responsible, I get punished? I have to bankroll her lifestyle? Don't be so dramatic, Heather said, her tears suddenly dry. It's not like you can't afford it. You're always talking about your big promotion and bonuses. So this is my fault for being successful? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No one's saying that, Dad sighed. But family helps family. You're in a position to be generous. I was generous, I said. I lent her $75,000. And now I'm being told I should just forget about it because she's my sister? Well, when you put it like that, Mom began. Yes, exactly like that, I interrupted. How would you put it? James, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. I think we should go. His voice was calm but firm. Yes, maybe that's best, Mom said quickly. Everyone's getting too emotional. We can discuss this another time. There's nothing to discuss, I said, standing up. Either Heather honors our agreement, or I'll have to pursue other options. Are you threatening legal action? Dad asked incredulously. Against your own sister? I'm saying I expect her to honor her word and our contract. After all we've done for you, Mom said shakily. I can't believe you'd create this drama on Thanksgiving of all days. I laughed bitterly. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? I worked my way through college. I saved for my own down payment. I built my career without any help. We gave you life, she retorted. We raised you. And clearly had a favorite while doing it. Heather gasped. That's not true. Mom and Dad love us equally. Equal love, unequal support, I replied, gathering my purse and coat. As James and I moved toward the door, Heather called out, If you walk out now, you're choosing money over family. I turned back one last time. No, I'm choosing honesty and respect over manipulation. The fact that you can't see the difference is exactly the problem. The drive home was mostly silent. James kept one hand on the wheel and the other holding mine. Finally he spoke. I wish I could say I'm surprised. You saw this coming, didn't you? I asked. He nodded. Not the specifics, but the general outcome. They've always expected different standards from you than from Heather. Tears began streaming down my face. $75,000, James. My entire emergency fund and a significant portion of my investment portfolio. How could she do this? Because she's always gotten away with it, he said simply. On a smaller scale, perhaps, but the pattern was established long ago. My phone buzzed with incoming messages. Mom was asking me to come back and fix things before they get worse. Dad was expressing his disappointment in my materialistic values. Heather hadn't messaged at all. What do I do now? I whispered. James squeezed my hand. You decide what your boundaries are worth to you. I nodded, wiping away tears. I think I just found out. The week after Thanksgiving passed in a blur of ignored calls from my parents and tense conversations with James about our next steps. By the following Monday, I had reached a decision. I would not let this go. The money represented years of hard work and careful saving. More importantly, the principle of the matter, that my sister had deliberately deceived me, could not be overlooked. I'm going to pursue this legally, I told James over dinner in our apartment. I know it sounds extreme, but I need to talk to Patricia about my options. Patricia Green had been my friend since college and now worked as a contract attorney for several financial firms. She agreed to meet me for coffee the next day. Technically, this is pretty straightforward, Patricia said after reviewing the loan agreement. This is a well-drafted document with clear terms that haven't been met. The fact that your sister's doesn't change the legal obligation. So, what's my next step? I asked. Before we go nuclear with a lawsuit, let's try a formal demand letter. I'll draft something official on my firm's letterhead. Sometimes that's enough to show you're serious. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I never thought I'd be in this position with my own sister. Patricia's expression softened. Family financial disputes are unfortunately common, but there's something else you should consider. When you mentioned the house is in Oakwood Hills, something didn't add up. Those properties start at around $700,000. If they needed $75,000 for a 15% down payment, that would put the house at $500,000, well below the neighborhood average. Her observation triggered something in my analytical brain. You're right. That doesn't make sense. It might be worth looking into exactly what they purchased and for how much. Property records are public. That evening, I sat at my computer and began what would become weeks of investigation. The first shock came immediately. Heather and Ryan's new house had sold for $850,000, not the $500,000 they had implied when asking for the loan. A 15% down payment would have required $127,500, far more than the $75,000 they had borrowed from me. They lied about the purchase price, I told James, showing him the property records. But why? Why not just ask for more if they needed it? Maybe they didn't need it at all, James suggested. Maybe the loan was never about meeting a shortfall. This unsettling possibility led me deeper into research mode. I created a spreadsheet tracking Heather and Ryan's visible expenses against their likely income based on their jobs. The math simply didn't add up. Even with Ryan's pharmaceutical sales position, they couldn't afford their current lifestyle, the house, the new SUV, the frequent getaways, the expensive furniture. They either have another source of income they're not disclosing, or they're in serious debt, I concluded after showing James my analysis. Or someone else is subsidizing them, James added quietly. The implication hung in the air. My parents had always supported Heather financially, but they were retired now, living on Dad's pension and their investments. They couldn't possibly be funding Heather's lavish lifestyle, could they? My cousin Rachel called me the following weekend, having heard about the Thanksgiving blow-up from her mother, my Aunt Carol. I wanted to check on you, Rachel said. That sounds like an awful situation. It's been pretty terrible, I admitted. I'm still trying to figure out what's really going on. After a pause, Rachel said, I'm not sure if this is relevant, but Heather approached me for a loan last year. $20,000 for what she called a business opportunity. I couldn't afford it, so I declined. Did she ever mention that to you again? I asked. No, and that's the strange part. She acted like it never happened. No hard feelings, nothing. I always wondered where she ended up getting the money. This revelation sent me down a new investigative path. I began reaching out to other family members and close friends, asking careful questions about whether Heather had ever approached them for financial help. The results were shocking. My uncle Stephen had lent her $15,000 for emergency medical expenses, that were never specified. My father's cousin Barbara had invested $30,000 in one of Heather's failed business ventures. Even my childhood friend Allison, who had remained close with both of us, confessed that Heather had borrowed $5,000 for temporary cash flow issues 2 years ago and never repaid it. None of them had mentioned these loans to each other, and all expressed surprise when I revealed the pattern. Heather had effectively isolated each person, making them feel their financial contribution was unique and specially requested. But the most devastating discovery came from an unexpected source. During a conversation with my grandmother Eleanor, who lived in a retirement community 3 hours away, she mentioned something that stopped me cold. "I've been meaning to ask how you used your portion of the inheritance," she said casually. "I know Heather bought that lovely house, but I haven't heard what you did with yours." "What inheritance?" I asked, my stomach nodding. Grandma Eleanor sounded confused. "From your grandfather's investment account. Frank told me he divided it equally between you girls when it matured last year. It was about $200,000 each after taxes." The room seemed to spin around me. "Grandma, I never received any inheritance." The silence on the phone was deafening. "That can't be right," she finally said. "Frank assured me both of you girls received your shares. He said you wanted to keep it private for tax reasons." "I never received a penny," I said, my voice hardly above a whisper. "And no one ever mentioned any inheritance to me." After hanging up with my increasingly distressed grandmother, I called James in tears. "They stole from me," I sobbed. "My own parents gave my inheritance to Heather." The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about Heather failing to repay a loan. This was about a systematic pattern of deception involving my entire immediate family. The next day, I met with Patricia again, bringing my substantial file of evidence. Her expression grew increasingly grim as she reviewed everything. "Madeline, this goes beyond a simple breach of contract," she said. "There's potential fraud here, possibly even elder abuse regarding your grandmother's assets if they were misappropriated without her knowledge. And the inheritance issue, that's a whole other legal matter." "What should I do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "First, we need to secure your legal position regarding the loan. We'll file suit immediately for the breach of contract. Then, we need to consider whether to include the inheritance issue or handle that separately." "I never wanted this to become so complicated," I said. "Unfortunately, your family made it complicated long before you discovered what was happening," Patricia replied. "From what you've shown me, this pattern of financial manipulation has been going on for years." That evening, I had my first session with Dr. Larson, a therapist James had encouraged me to see. "What I'm struggling with most," I told her, "is that they must have been laughing at me behind my back this whole time, using me as their personal ATM while giving Heather everything." "What makes you say they were laughing at you?" Dr. Larson asked. "Because they knew about the inheritance. They knew they had diverted my share to Heather. And then they sat there at Thanksgiving, acting shocked about the loan, telling me I should be generous because I'm doing well financially, knowing full well they had kept $200,000 from me." "That must feel like an extraordinary betrayal," she observed. "It's like finding out my entire family history was a fiction," I said, tears flowing freely. "Every time they praised me for being the responsible one, they were really just justifying why they could take advantage of me." Over the next several weeks, therapy sessions became my lifeline as I processed not just the financial betrayal, but the emotional one. Dr. Larson helped me see how I had internalized a family dynamic that cast me as the perpetual giver and Heather as the perpetual taker. "The hardest part to accept," I told her during our 4th session, "is that they didn't need my money. Between the inheritance and whatever other support my parents have been providing, they could have afforded that down payment without my help. They chose to take it from me anyway." "Why do you think that is?" Dr. Larson asked. I considered the question carefully. "Because taking from me has become the family norm. It's expected. I'm not seen as someone with needs of my own. I'm seen as a resource to be tapped whenever Heather requires something." As painful as these realizations were, they also brought clarity. For the first time in my life, I could see the dysfunctional patterns that had shaped our family for decades. And with that clarity came a determination to break those patterns once and for all. By January, I had moved beyond the initial shock and heartbreak into a phase of methodical action. With Patricia's guidance, I developed a comprehensive strategy to address both the loan default and the larger pattern of financial exploitation. We need to approach this systematically, Patricia advised during one of our strategy sessions. The loan is straightforward legal territory. The inheritance is more complex since it involves understanding exactly how your grandfather's assets were structured and who had legal authority over their distribution. I nodded, taking careful notes. And what about the pattern of loans to other family members? Does that factor in? It establishes a history of behavior that could be relevant, especially if we need to demonstrate that this wasn't a one-time misunderstanding but part of a calculated pattern. With this framework in mind, we developed a three-pronged approach. First, we would pursue the loan repayment through formal legal channels. Second, we would investigate the inheritance situation to determine what legal claims I might have. Third, we would document the broader pattern of financial manipulation to support both cases and protect other family members from similar exploitation. I struggled with whether to go public with this family matter by filing a lawsuit. After much reflection, I decided that privacy had only enabled the abuse to continue. The discomfort of public exposure was a necessary consequence my family would have to face. I've thought about what you said regarding the balance between justice and family harmony, I told James as we walked through the park one chilly afternoon. I've realized something important. There never was true family harmony. There was only my compliance with an unfair system. James squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you for seeing that. It takes a lot of courage. The hardest part is knowing this will permanently change my relationship with my parents, I admitted. But I can't unsee what I've discovered. Sometimes relationships need to change, he said gently, especially when they're built on unhealthy foundations. The following week, Patricia filed the lawsuit for breach of contract, seeking the full $75,000 plus interest and legal fees. As expected, the news spread quickly through the family grapevine. My phone exploded with messages. My mother left tearful voicemails begging me to stop this madness before it tears the family apart. My father's messages were shorter and colder, expressing his profound disappointment in my choices. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins weighed in, most suggesting I was overreacting or being unnecessarily litigious. Interestingly, the one person who didn't contact me directly was Heather. As difficult as this backlash was, it also created an opportunity. With the loan issue now public knowledge, I could have more open conversations with extended family members about the broader pattern of financial manipulation. I scheduled a lunch with my grandmother Eleanor, who had been deeply disturbed by our previous conversation about the inheritance. I've been going through all of Benjamin's papers, she told me, referring to my late grandfather. Frank assured me the investment account would be divided equally between you girls when you both turned 30. The documentation clearly shows there was over $400,000 in that account when it matured. And you never heard anything from me acknowledging receipt of my share? I asked gently. Her eyes filled with tears.
No, dear.
Frank handled everything. He said you preferred to keep financial matters private, which seemed odd given your profession, but I didn't question it. I'm so sorry you've been brought into this, I said, taking her hand. Don't apologize to me, she said firmly. I'm the one who should have been more vigilant. But I trusted my own son to honor his father's wishes. Her expression hardened. That trust was clearly misplaced. Eleanor proved to be an unexpected ally in my quest for accountability. She provided all the documentation she had regarding my grandfather's assets and wrote a detailed affidavit about her understanding of how the inheritance was to be distributed. While I was building my case, James surprised me with a proposal that caught me completely off guard. During a weekend getaway to a mountain cabin, a brief respite from the legal and emotional turmoil, he got down on one knee. I know this might seem like strange timing, he said, holding out a simple but elegant diamond ring. But watching you stand up for yourself, Seeing your strength and integrity in the face of such difficult circumstances, it's only made me more certain that you're the woman I want to spend my life with." Through tears of joy, the first purely happy tears I'd shed in months, I said yes. "I can't offer you a drama-free family situation right now," I warned him.
He laughed.
"I'm not marrying your family. I'm marrying you." With this new joy came a renewed determination to establish healthy boundaries with my family. I drafted a formal letter to my parents with Patricia's help, outlining exactly what would need to happen for reconciliation to be possible. 1. Full repayment of the $75,000 loan. 2. A complete accounting of my grandfather's inheritance and restoration of my rightful share. 3. An acknowledgement of the pattern of favoritism and financial exploitation. 4. A commitment to family therapy if we were to have any relationship moving forward. "Do you think they'll agree to any of this?" James asked as I sealed the envelope. "Honestly, no," I replied. "But sending this letter isn't really about their response. It's about me clearly communicating my boundaries for the first time in my life." As predicted, my parents' response was a mixture of denial, deflection, and emotional manipulation. They claimed I was tearing the family apart over money and suggested I needed psychological help for my obsession with fairness. Meanwhile, Patricia's investigation into the inheritance revealed something we hadn't anticipated. My grandfather's investment account had been set up as a trust with specific disbursement instructions. This meant that legally, my father had acted as a trustee and potentially violated his fiduciary duty by not distributing the assets as directed. "This strengthens your case considerably," Patricia explained. "Breach of fiduciary duty carries significant legal weight. We decided to time our legal actions strategically. Through family connections, we learned that Heather and Ryan were planning to refinance their mortgage to take advantage of lower interest rates. A lawsuit would complicate that process considerably. I don't want to be vindictive," I told Patricia, "but I do want them to face real consequences for their actions." "In my experience," she replied, "people like your sister and parents rarely change unless the consequences of their behavior become too uncomfortable to ignore." I nodded, thinking about all the years I'd tried to win my parents' approval by being the responsible one, never realizing that this very quality made me valuable to them in a way I hadn't understood, as a reliable resource to support Heather. "I'm not just doing this for myself," I realized aloud. "I'm doing it for every family member they might target next." If you've ever had to confront someone you love about a painful truth, you know how excruciating that process can be. As I prepared for the next phase of this journey, I found myself questioning everything. Was I overreacting? Was money worth damaging family relationships? Was I becoming someone I didn't want to be? These doubts would creep in during quiet moments, making me wonder if I should just let it all go for the sake of peace. But then I would remember the look on my father's face at Thanksgiving when he suggested I should simply give my sister $75,000 because I was doing well financially, all while knowing he had diverted my inheritance to her. I would remember my mother's tears, weaponized to make me feel guilty for requesting what was rightfully mine. And I would find my resolve strengthening once again. As difficult as this journey has been, I've learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the only way to break cycles of dysfunction that hurt everyone involved. If you're facing a similar situation in your own family, remember that setting boundaries isn't about punishment. It's about creating the possibility for healthier relationships built on mutual respect rather than exploitation. I should have anticipated that my family wouldn't simply accept accountability without a fight. As February turned to March, their response escalated from private appeals to a full-blown campaign to discredit me within our extended family and social circles. The first sign came when my cousin Derek called, sounding uncomfortable. "I just wanted to check if you're doing okay," he said hesitantly. "Mom told me about your financial troubles." "My financial troubles?" I repeated, confused. "Yeah, about how you're suing Heather because you're having money problems and need cash quickly. She said everyone's really worried about you." I was stunned into momentary silence. "Derek, that's absolutely not true. I'm suing Heather because she borrowed $75,000 and refuses to repay it as agreed."
Oh,
He sounded uncertain. That's not what Aunt Diana said. Similar conversations followed with other relatives. My mother had apparently embarked on a systematic effort to reframe the narrative, painting me as financially desperate and emotionally unstable. According to her version, I had offered to help Heather and Ryan but then changed my mind due to unexpected financial difficulties and was now trying to renege on a gift. It's classic Darvo, Dr. Larson explained during our next therapy session. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Your parents are denying the original agreement, attacking your character, and positioning Heather as the victim of your unreasonable demands rather than acknowledging her as the offender who broke a contract. This character assassination was painful, but not nearly as devastating as what came next. One evening in late March, my father called, the first direct contact since I'd sent my letter outlining conditions for reconciliation. "Madeline," he said, his voice grave. "I'm calling about your mother." My heart raced. Is she okay?
she's not well.
The stress of this situation has caused her blood pressure to spike dangerously. Her doctor is concerned about stroke risk. The familiar guilt surged through me. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "You need to drop this lawsuit nonsense," he continued. "It's literally making your mother sick. Is money really worth your mother's health?" I closed my eyes, trying to center myself. "Dad, I'm genuinely sorry Mom isn't feeling well. But this situation, as you call it, was created by choices that you, Mom, and Heather made. My requesting repayment of a loan and my rightful inheritance isn't what's causing stress. It's the fact that you all chose to take advantage of me and are now facing consequences. So that's it? You're choosing money over your mother's well-being." His voice had taken on that familiar judgmental tone. "I'm choosing honesty and accountability. Mom's health is important, and I hope she follows her doctor's recommendations. But using her medical condition as emotional leverage isn't going to work anymore." After hanging up, I broke down in tears. James held me as I sobbed. "You did the right thing," he assured me. "They're trying to manipulate you with the same tactics that have worked in the past." "It still hurts," I whispered. "Of course it does. They're your parents. You love them despite everything." A week later, Uncle Stephen reached out, offering to mediate the situation. I agreed to meet him for coffee, curious about his perspective as my father's younger brother. "I want you to know," he said after we'd exchanged pleasantries, "that I believe you're doing the right thing." His support caught me off guard. "You do?" He nodded grimly. "Frank and I grew up with the same dynamic. Our sister Margaret was the golden child who could do no wrong. I was the forgotten middle child, and Frank was the responsible oldest. The pattern repeats itself." "Did Dad ever talk to you about this?"
I asked. "No."
That's the irony. Frank resented how our parents favored Margaret, yet he's done exactly the same thing with his own daughters. Stephen stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "I tried to mention it once, years ago. He completely denied it." Stephen shared that he'd had his own financial disputes with my father over a business investment gone wrong. "Frank has always had a convenient relationship with financial ethics," he said carefully. "If it benefits his narrative, he'll bend the rules." While Stephen's insights were validating, his attempt at mediation failed. My parents refused to meet unless I dropped the lawsuit as a show of good faith, which I declined to do. The next escalation came in the form of a surprise visit from my mother. I returned home from work one evening to find her sitting in her car outside my condo building. "Mom," I approached cautiously. "What are you doing here?" She emerged from the car, looking simultaneously defiant and fragile. "We need to talk, Madeline. Not through lawyers or letters. Face to face." Against my better judgment, I invited her up. James was working late, so we had the place to ourselves. "This has gone too far," she began once we were seated in my living room. "Your father hasn't slept properly in weeks. The stress is affecting his heart." "Mom, please don't." "No, you need to hear this. He's had 2 episodes of chest pain. The doctor says it's stress-related angina. Is that what you want? For your father to have a heart attack over money?" I took a deep breath. What I want is for my family to respect me enough to honor their agreements and not steal my inheritance. Steal is such an ugly word, she flinched. We were going to tell you about the inheritance eventually. We just needed to help Heather get on her feet first. And when would that be, exactly? She's 35, Mom. She's been getting on her feet her entire adult life. You've always been so hard on your sister, she sighed. Not everyone is as naturally disciplined as you are. This isn't about discipline. It's about basic honesty and respect. We respect you enormously, she insisted. We're so proud of everything you've accomplished, while simultaneously undermining me financially and emotionally, I countered. That's not respect, Mom. That's exploitation. She recoiled, as if I'd slapped her. How can you say such a thing? After everything we've done for you? What have you done for me, exactly? Because from where I'm sitting, you've favored Heather at every turn, diverted my inheritance to her, and are now trying to guilt me into dropping a legitimate legal claim by weaponizing Dad's health. Tears filled her eyes, those familiar tears that had always made me back down in the past. I don't even recognize you anymore. The Madeline I raised would never treat her family this way. The Madeline you raised finally learned to value herself enough to set boundaries, I replied steadily. Maybe you never really knew me at all. After she left, I felt emotionally drained but strangely empowered. For the first time, I had faced my mother's manipulation tactics without caving to guilt. The week before our scheduled court date, Heather finally broke her silence with a tearful phone call. Maddie, please, she begged. We can work this out between us. It doesn't have to involve lawyers and courts. I tried to work it out between us for 6 months, Heather. You ignored me. I was overwhelmed. The house, the move, everything cost more than we expected. Yet you found money for new furniture and weekend getaways, I observed. She paused, then changed tactics. Ryan and I are having problems. The stress of this lawsuit is tearing us apart. He blames me for everything. That's between you and Ryan, I said firmly. But since you mentioned him, I should tell you, he called me yesterday. What? Her voice shifted from tearful to sharp. What did he say? He offered to provide documentation about the inheritance and other financial arrangements if we'll agree not to name him in any future legal actions. He's lying, she shouted. Whatever he told you is completely false. I haven't agreed to anything yet, I said calmly. But it's interesting that you immediately assume he's providing damaging information rather than supporting your version of events. After more unsuccessful attempts to emotionally manipulate me, Heather finally made a concrete offer. She and Ryan would repay the loan over 3 years with minimal interest. Why should I accept that when our original agreement was 6 months? You're already 7 months overdue. Because we're family, she said simply, as if that explained everything. That's exactly why you should have honored our agreement in the first place, I replied. The day before our court date, my parents made one final attempt to pressure me into dropping the case. My father called to announce that they would not attend my upcoming wedding if I proceeded with the lawsuit. You're forcing us to choose between our daughters, he said. And we won't abandon Heather when she needs us. The implicit message was clear. They had always chosen Heather, and they always would. I'm not asking you to choose, I said. I'm asking for accountability. But if you see those as mutually exclusive, that's your decision to make. After hanging up, I turned to James. They're not coming to our wedding. He wrapped me in a tight embrace. Then we'll surround ourselves with people who truly support us. Despite the pain of this ultimate rejection, I felt a strange sense of calm. The threats, the emotional manipulation, the character assassination, none of it had worked. Tomorrow, we would have our day in court, and for once, my family would have to face the consequences of their actions. The morning of the court date dawned crisp and clear. James and I arrived at the county courthouse 30 minutes early, meeting Patricia in the lobby. She projected calm confidence, which helped steady my nerves. Remember, she advised, stick to the facts. The documentation speaks for itself. Don't let emotion overcome your testimony, even if they try to provoke you. We entered the courtroom to find my entire immediate family already seated on the opposite side. My parents sat rigidly, avoiding eye contact. Heather dabbed at tears beside Ryan, who looked uncomfortably at his phone. Behind them sat several aunts and uncles, including Stephen, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. To my surprise, grandmother Eleanor had made the 3-hour drive to attend. She sat on our side of the courtroom, along with Rachel and a few friends who had come for moral support. Just as the proceedings were about to begin, Patricia was approached by Heather and Ryan's attorney, who requested a brief conference in the hallway. I waited anxiously for 10 minutes until Patricia returned, her expression carefully neutral. "They're offering a settlement," she whispered. "Full repayment of the loan with minimal interest, paid over 18 months. They want a confidentiality agreement as part of the deal." "What about the inheritance?" I asked. "Not included. They claim that's a separate matter between you and your parents." I considered the offer. It would resolve the immediate loan issue without the stress of a court battle. But it would also allow them to maintain the fiction that the inheritance was legitimately redirected. "I want to proceed," I decided. "This isn't just about the loan anymore." Patricia nodded, seemingly pleased with my decision. "I thought you might say that." When the judge entered and the case was called, Heather and Ryan's attorney immediately requested another opportunity to discuss settlement. "Your Honor, we believe this family matter could be resolved without the court's intervention if given a brief opportunity to confer." The judge, an older woman with penetrating eyes, looked to Patricia. "Counsel?" "Your Honor, my client has already declined the defendant's settlement offer. We are prepared to proceed." "Very well," the judge nodded. Opening statements. Patricia presented our case with methodical precision, outlining the clear terms of the loan agreement, the documented pattern of avoidance when repayment was due, and the broader context of financial manipulation. This case, Your Honor, while seemingly straightforward in its breach of contract claim, represents a culmination of a years-long pattern of financial exploitation. The defendants not only failed to honor their written agreement, but actively misrepresented their intentions from the beginning. Heather and Ryan's attorney countered with an argument about family understandings and mutual support expectations, suggesting that the formal agreement didn't reflect the true nature of the arrangement. The plaintiff has historically provided financial assistance to her sister without formal repayment expectations. This particular agreement, while documented, was understood within the context of this established familial support system. The judge looked skeptical. "Counselor, are you suggesting that a signed contract should be invalidated based on prior gift-giving patterns?" "Not invalidated, Your Honor, but interpreted within the appropriate familial context." When it came time for testimony, I took the stand first, carefully describing the circumstances of the loan, the subsequent avoidance, and the Thanksgiving confrontation. "Ms. Reynolds," Heather's attorney began during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you've enjoyed significant financial success while your sister has struggled?" "Objection," Patricia interjected. "Relevance." "I'll allow it," the judge ruled. "The witness may answer." "I've worked very hard for my financial stability," I replied evenly. "And I've supported my sister numerous times throughout our adult lives. So this particular loan wasn't unusual in your relationship? The amount was much larger than any previous help I'd provided. That's why I insisted on a formal agreement. And yet you chose to bring this matter to court rather than work it out within the family. Doesn't that suggest this is about punishing your sister rather than recovering funds?" I met the attorney's gaze directly. "This is about accountability. I tried to resolve this privately for months before filing suit." When Heather took the stand, she presented herself as the perpetually struggling sibling who had always lived in my shadow. "Maddie has always been the perfect one," she said tearfully. "The smart one, the responsible one." I thought this loan was her way of finally helping me achieve some stability, but then she turned it into this legal nightmare. "And did you understand that the money was to be repaid according to the terms in the agreement you signed?" Patricia asked during cross-examination. "Well, yes, technically," Heather admitted. "But in our family, these things have always been flexible." So, you acknowledge signing an agreement that specified repayment within 6 months? Yes, but... And you acknowledge making no payments whatsoever in the 7 months since that deadline passed? We couldn't afford to at the time, Heather said defensively. Yet you purchased new furniture, took weekend trips, and made other discretionary purchases during this period? Heather glanced at our parents before answering. Those were necessary expenses for our new home and Ryan's work obligations. The most surprising testimony came from my father, who was called as a witness regarding the family financial dynamics. Under oath, he was forced to answer questions about the inheritance. Mr. Reynolds, Patricia began, are you familiar with the investment account established by your father, Benjamin Reynolds, for the benefit of his granddaughters? Dad shifted uncomfortably. Yes. And what was your understanding of how those funds were to be distributed? They were to be used for the girls' benefit as needed, he hedged. Was there a specific distribution plan outlined by your father? He hesitated. He suggested it be split equally when they both turned 30. Suggested or directed? Patricia pressed. It was my understanding that I had discretion as the account manager, he replied stiffly. Did you inform Madeline about this inheritance when she turned 30?
No.
Did you distribute any portion of those funds to her? Not directly. Where did those funds go, Mr. Reynolds? My father glanced at my mother before answering. They were used to help Heather with various financial needs. All of them, including Madeline's portion. We intended to address that eventually, he said defensively. After 7 years? Patricia asked incredulously. When Ryan took the stand, his testimony deviated significantly from the family narrative. Under oath, he admitted that he and Heather had discussed the loan as a soft obligation that Madeline probably wouldn't enforce because she never stood up to the family. We figured if we delayed long enough, she'd just let it go, he testified, avoiding looking at Heather. That's what she always did in the past. His admission sent a visible shock through my family's side of the courtroom. My mother buried her face in her hands, while Heather stared at her husband in disbelief. After 4 hours of testimony and arguments, the judge called a brief recess before delivering her ruling. During the break, Heather approached me in the hallway. How could you do this to us? She hissed. You've destroyed everything. I didn't destroy anything, Heather. You did that when you chose to lie and manipulate instead of honoring your commitments. You've always been jealous of me, she said bitterly. This is your revenge for all the attention I got growing up. I looked at my sister, really looked at her perhaps for the first time. Behind the tears and accusations, I saw something I hadn't recognized before. Fear. Fear of standing on her own. Fear of living without the constant support and special treatment she'd always received. This isn't about jealousy, I said quietly. It's about breaking a pattern that's been harmful to everyone, including you. When court resumed, the judge delivered her ruling with unequivocal clarity. Based on the evidence and testimony presented, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The loan agreement is valid and enforceable. The defendants are ordered to repay the full amount of $75,000 plus 5% interest from the date of default and reasonable legal fees. She continued, addressing Heather and Ryan directly. The court is not persuaded by the argument that family relationships somehow negate written agreements. If anything, such relationships should encourage greater fidelity to one's word, not less. Regarding the inheritance issue, the judge noted that while it wasn't directly part of this case, there was sufficient evidence to suggest mismanagement of trust assets. She recommended I pursue that claim separately if desired. As we gathered our belongings, I noticed my grandmother speaking intently with my father, her expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve. My mother sat alone, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Outside the courthouse, Grandmother Eleanor approached me. I'm proud of you, she said firmly. It took courage to do what you did today. I never wanted it to come to this, I admitted. Sometimes the right path isn't the easy one, she replied. Your grandfather would have been appalled by how his wishes were disregarded. I intend to make certain that doesn't happen again. That evening, James arranged a small dinner at our favorite restaurant with the people who had supported me through the ordeal. grandmother Eleanor, Rachel, Patricia, and a few close friends. The mood was bittersweet, a victory tempered by the pain of family divisions laid bare. "A toast," James proposed, raising his glass. "To Madeline, whose courage and integrity inspire me every day. To boundaries and accountability," added Patricia. "To new beginnings," grandmother Eleanor said softly. As I looked around the table at these people who had stood by me through this difficult journey, I realized something profound. Family isn't defined by blood alone, but by respect, honesty, and mutual support. The family I was building now might look different from what I had envisioned, but it was built on a foundation of authenticity rather than obligation and exploitation. The next morning, a local newspaper ran a small article about the case, focusing on the cautionary tale of mixing family and financial agreements. Within days, 3 other relatives contacted me privately to share similar experiences with Heather and my parents, expressing gratitude that someone had finally broken the silence. As difficult as the courtroom showdown had been, it represented a turning point, not just in my financial situation, but in my understanding of what family truly means and what I deserved from those relationships. 6 months after the court ruling, I stood in the bridal suite of a charming vineyard venue, watching as my maid of honor Rachel adjusted my veil. My wedding day had arrived, and though it looked different from what I had once imagined, it felt surprisingly right. "Nervous?" Rachel asked, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Strangely calm," I replied. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly the right people around me." Those people did not include my parents or Heather. Despite multiple attempts at reconciliation, including a heartfelt letter I had sent 2 months earlier, they had declined to attend. My father had responded with a brief note stating they weren't ready to move past what happened, while Heather hadn't responded at all. The court-mandated repayment of my loan had begun, though not without complications. Heather and Ryan had been forced to sell their luxury SUV and some of their higher-end furniture to make the initial payments. According to family gossip, this had created significant tension in their marriage, culminating in Ryan moving out temporarily. As for the inheritance, that battle had been surprisingly short-lived. Once grandmother Eleanor became involved, examining the trust documents herself and threatening legal action of her own, my father had reluctantly agreed to restore my portion of the inheritance with a structured payment plan over 3 years. "Your grandmother is a force of nature," James had commented after witnessing one of her firmly worded phone calls to my father. "Now I see where you get your backbone." Eleanor had gone a step further, revising her own will to establish direct trusts for all her grandchildren, with independent trustees to ensure proper distribution. She had also become a surprising source of wisdom and support, calling weekly and visiting often. "You look beautiful," she said now, entering the bridal suite with a small velvet box. "I brought something for you." Inside was a delicate pearl necklace with a diamond pendant. "These were my mother's," she explained. "I want you to have them today." As she fastened the necklace around my neck, she added quietly, "Family traditions should be about passing down love and values, not pain and favoritism. You're helping break a cycle that's gone on for too many generations." Walking down the aisle with Uncle Stephen, who had graciously agreed to step in when my father declined, I felt a momentary pang for what should have been. But as I met James's eyes at the altar, surrounded by people who truly supported us, that regret was quickly replaced by certainty. Our first Thanksgiving as a married couple arrived exactly 1 year after the confrontation that had changed everything. We hosted dinner at our condo, with an eclectic group that included grandmother Eleanor, Rachel and her husband, James's parents, and a few close friends who had become like family. "It's strange," I confided to James as we prepared the turkey that morning. "Part of me still feels like I should be setting places for my parents and Heather." "That's natural," he assured me. "They've been part of every Thanksgiving of your life until now." "Do you think they'll ever come around?" I asked, voicing the question that still lingered in quiet moments. "I think they might eventually," he said thoughtfully. "But the real question is what kind of relationship would be healthy if they do." That question had been central to my ongoing work with Dr. Larson. What would a healthy relationship with my family look like? Could there ever be true reconciliation without fundamental changes in the dynamics that had shaped our interactions for decades? In early December, I received an unexpected call from Ryan. "Heather and I are getting divorced," he said without preamble. "I thought you should hear from me directly." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. Despite everything, I had never wished for my sister's marriage to fail. "Don't be," he replied. "It's been a long time coming. The lawsuit just brought everything to the surface." After a pause, he added, "She's living with your parents now. They're helping her with the divorce costs." Some patterns were difficult to break. The most surprising development came in February when my father suffered a minor heart attack. Despite our estrangement, I immediately went to the hospital. My mother seemed shocked to see me in the waiting room. "You came," she said simply. "Of course I did," I replied. "He's still my father." That crisis opened a narrow channel of communication. After my father's recovery, my parents cautiously agreed to a meeting facilitated by a family therapist Dr. Larson had recommended. The session was tense and difficult. My father, perhaps humbled by his health scare, acknowledged for the first time that there had been some inequities in how they had treated Heather and me. My mother found this harder to admit, still insisting they had only responded to our different needs. "Madeline was always so independent," she repeated. "Heather needed more support." "Did it ever occur to you," I asked, "that I became independent because I learned early on that I couldn't count on the same support Heather received?" The therapist guided us through this and other painful realizations. While one session couldn't undo decades of entrenched patterns, it represented a first step toward potential healing. By spring, James and I had more joyful news to share. We were expecting our first child. This development prompted serious discussions about what role my parents and Heather would play in our child's life. "I want our baby to have grandparents," I admitted to James. "But I need to know they won't repeat the same patterns of favoritism with our children that they did with Heather and me." "That's a reasonable boundary," he agreed. "And one worth maintaining even if it's uncomfortable." When I shared the pregnancy news with my parents, their delight was palpable. My mother immediately began talking about nursery themes and baby showers. My father, more subdued but clearly moved, asked when they could visit. "I'd like you to be involved in your grandchild's life," I told them carefully. "But we need to establish some ground rules first." Those rules included no unscheduled visits, no undermining our parenting decisions, and most importantly, equal treatment of all grandchildren, including any future children Heather might have. "We've seen what favoritism does to a family," I explained. "I won't allow that pattern to continue into the next generation." My relationship with Heather remained the most complicated. After her divorce was finalized, she reached out with a text that seemed sincere but stopped short of any real accountability. "I miss my sister. Can we talk sometime?" Our eventual meeting at a neutral coffee shop was awkward. She looked different, less polished, more genuine somehow. "I'm sorry about your divorce," I offered. "It was for the best," she sighed. "Ryan and I brought out the worst in each other." We carefully navigated conversation about neutral topics until Heather finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I know I messed up," she said, staring into her coffee. "With the loan, with everything." "Yes, you did." I agreed, not unkindly. "I've been in therapy," she continued, "trying to understand why I've made the choices I have. Why I've always felt entitled to more than my share." It wasn't a full apology, but it was something, an acknowledgement that her behavior had been problematic. Whether this represented genuine growth or another manipulation tactic remained to be seen. By Christmas, our extended family had settled into a new configuration. Grandmother Eleanor hosted the holiday at her home, creating neutral territory where various family factions could interact without the pressure of past dynamics. My parents came for Christmas Eve, but left before Heather arrived on Christmas Day, a scheduling arrangement that acknowledged ongoing tensions while allowing everyone to participate in family traditions. As I sat by the fire, My hand resting on my growing belly, Grandmother Eleanor settled beside me. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "families are always evolving. The relationships we have at one point in our lives aren't necessarily the ones we'll have forever. Do you think there's hope for real reconciliation?"
I asked.
She considered this carefully. "I think there's always hope for growth and change. But reconciliation doesn't mean returning to old patterns. It means creating something new and healthier. That's what I'm trying to do," I said. "I know," she squeezed my hand. "And you're doing it beautifully." Looking around at this gathering, some blood relatives, some chosen family, I realized we were creating a new template for what family could mean. One built on mutual respect rather than obligation, on accountability rather than enabling, on authentic connection rather than prescribed roles. The journey from that Thanksgiving confrontation to this moment had been painful and challenging. I had lost certain illusions about my family, but gained clarity and strength I never knew I possessed. I had discovered that sometimes love requires setting firm boundaries, that true family supports your growth rather than exploiting your strengths, and that it's never too late to create healthier patterns. As I reflect on this transformative year, I wonder how many of you have faced similar challenges with family dynamics and financial exploitation. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your generosity? Did you find the courage to set boundaries even when it meant risking relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to my channel for more authentic discussions about navigating complex family relationships and finding your voice. Your support means everything as I continue sharing these difficult but important experiences. Hit the like button if you believe in holding family members accountable just as you would anyone else, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for themselves, even against those closest to them. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey. Remember, true family, whether by blood or by choice, lifts you up instead of using you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to break cycles of dysfunction, even when it's heartbreaking to do so.